so much for joining. I'm really delighted to be here today and to be able to run this lecture for you all. Some of you may have already seen the bio about me that was sent round by Pauline in advance, but if not, my name's Niluka. I'm a senior consultant at KPMG. I have almost 5 years of experience and my areas include customer-led innovation, experience design, brand strategy, communications, and a little bit of behavioural science in there too. Outside of KPMG, I'm also the founder of Help Me Present and I'm a writer and a poet. Education-wise, I studied English literature and language at Oxford University and I have a certificate in rhetoric from Harvard as well. I'm also a qualified brand strategist with Section 4, having been lectured by Professor Scott Galloway of NYU Stern. And let's get into it. Today I'm so excited to be here and we're going to be looking at, you can see it on your screen now, purpose during the pandemic. What it means for brands and the self. And there are two key questions that we'll be covering today and I want to explore with you. The first is around how has COVID-19 impacted consumer sentiment and what does that mean for brands today? Second question is how might the current challenge shape your own personal brand and what you want to achieve? So I'm going to pivot the lecture slightly. I'm going to start off as lecturer and perhaps by the end be a little bit more in career coach mode, but I hope you'll find it useful and valuable. And when I was putting this together, the running theme between these two questions is really purpose. Organisational purpose and the self and purpose in terms of your own identity. And that's what I'm going to be looking at today. So those two different perspectives. I'll also be leaving some time for Q&A at the end, so if you do have any questions, write them down and I'm more than happy to answer them when we get to it. So if we start first with COVID-19 and the impact on consumers, their behaviours, their attitudes and what that therefore means for brands today. Well, firstly, I think we can all agree that COVID has impacted our lives. The world has absolutely changed. The home has become more central. You know, we've had more time to think and consider our lives, and none of us expected any of this to happen. So in short, we have a much more reflective and much more conscious customer, and as a result, this new customer cares as much for the provider as they do the product or the service. And it's clear in the stats. Firstly, 71% of consumers believe if a company is putting, profit over people, they're going to lose trust in that brand forever. I mean, pretty startling, that statistic. Next, over 1/3 of customers feel it's important that a brand's values matches their own values, that a brand's values matches their own values. 50% of consumers believe that they are belief-driven consumers. So what do we mean by belief-driven consumers? Well, this is where someone's opinions, their beliefs, their views on the world, often tapping into the sociological aspect, will influence not just what they buy, but who they buy from. So not just what they buy, but who they buy from. It's pretty powerful, and this is what we're calling the new consumer that we've seen born out of COVID-19, born out of the pandemic. And what does that mean for purpose? Well, brands that have a clear sense of purpose, that aren't just pursuing gaining profit or gaining more money, they're the ones that we're seeing grow faster, and this is from the research and brand agency Kantar, and you can see here that those that have a high commitment to purpose have grown at more than twice the rate of others. So your Walmarts, your Nikes, Google, perceived positive impact is high, and corresponding to that, the growth is also high. But I'm just going to pause here because purpose is indeed a little bit of a conscientious subject, or rather contentious subject, it has very much been criticised in the past. It has been flawed in some ways. It's been around for a while, but it's come to the forefront in the last 5 years or so. You might have heard of it already. Evidence supporting brand purpose came from the book Grow, a book by Jim Stengel, the ex-CMO of P&G, and it had a huge impact. In fact, the CEO of WPP at the time said he felt utterly convinced by it. And he talks in the book, Jim talks in the book about brand ideals and a business's aim to improve people's lives as having a link and influencing that company's financial performance. But this has been questioned recently. Richard Shotton in The Choice Factory floors the argument, stating the choice of brands to prove the theory was too narrow, and that data was manipulated to share this wishful vision that consumers and marketers want to see. And if you are interested in learning a little bit more around the criticism around brand purpose, then that is a great book to go look at, chapter 14 specifically, if you are interested. So brand purpose has been criticised in the past. To summarise, is it a way for marketers and brand managers to feel good about themselves? A way to bring meaning into a supposed shallow industry? And indeed, are the methods to track that link, that correlation between brand purpose and financial performance, are those methods robust enough? So this has all been questioned in the past. Now, I think there is something in this. I really do. However, I also think that COVID-19 has made brand purpose more important because it's raised big questions about our world, our existence, our ways of living, our futures that we didn't have so much before. So I think, if anything, brand purpose has become much more relevant today. And you saw it in the stats earlier around the new consumer. We do have a more reflective, conscious consumer. And I do think that that will mean that brands that are able to tap into a greater purpose are more likely to attract this type of consumer, and in doing so, more sales, more revenue, and will just perform better. So I do think that brand purpose now is perhaps more relevant than it has been before. And the ESG agenda is becoming more important too. So ESG, what do I mean by that? That stands for the environmental, social, and governance agenda of a company. And what we can see is it's clear that brands that do good are gaining more traction in the market. And you can see here, these have taken from IBM. You know, consumers are looking for brands that, if you look down, you know, clean products, health and wellness, sustainable, support recycling, organic ingredients. Not only that, but they're also willing to pay a premium. They're willing to pay more for companies that offer and do good. And so it's really interesting. I mean, if you look here, 72% want to ensure authenticity of the product. It's really interesting, you know, the authenticity of the product. And lower down, 71% want companies to be providing full transparency, you know, the sustainability and the environmental aspect as well. And I would say that probably COVID has brought to light the E and the S of the ESG agenda the most, environmental, because we saw, you know, with travel coming to a close, just the positive impact on the environment that had and on CO2 emissions. It's pretty remarkable. The S as well, so that social element, the community, people helping each other, looking out for each other, that really came through in COVID. Local you know, shops and communities did very well, and so I think that is going to be something that brands need to be playing into more going forwards too. And therefore, brands that are priding themselves on doing good are likely to gain more and more traction as a result of COVID. And When thinking about your USP, it's a great way for brands to tap into this ESG agenda. And I'll just touch on two examples here. So the first one is Wild, which is a deodorant company. Now, deodorant been around for ages. There's hundreds of deodorants in the market. How on earth do you stand out? Well, Wild created a natural, plastic-free and sustainable product, and they grew to over 6,000 customers in just 5 months of launching, and that's pretty big growth for a startup that no one had ever heard of before. And indeed, the natural deodorant market is growing by more than 20% year on year here in the UK. Now, will it ever beat Dove or the more established brands? I would say probably not, but if we go back to the stats on the new customer that we saw before, and we combine that with the fact that the younger generation are much more likely to lack brand loyalty, i.e. they're more likely to experiment, then it really is a case that this brand may have a very good chance in being able to draw people in who are conscious about the brand and indeed who lack a sense of brand loyalty, and they may indeed give it a chance. If we turn to the second example I have on here, which is Kind Bars, they're tapping into the S of the ESG agenda, that social element, and this is already a pretty established brand. They're part of the Mars family, but even they are doing something to differentiate themselves. You know, they're in partnership with a campaign called Calm, which is the campaign against living miserably, all around mental health. Again, COVID, mental health has really come to the forefront, people being at home, anxiety levels, divorce rates are up, so we can understand why this campaign may do even better as a result of COVID. So it's pretty remarkable. All in all, 56% of consumers say that the environmental and social practices of a company have an impact when choosing whether to buy from them. So I'm going to ask you actually to ask yourselves whether it is important to you. Would you be put off by a brand if they don't, consider their environmental and social practices? I'll leave that with you to consider, but 56%, pretty high. And I think it's important to say that this isn't just about the ESG agenda. Consumers are also caring more now about how brands are treating their employees, not just how brands treat them, the consumer. And we've seen a few brands come onto fire because of this. So Amazon, horrendous working hours, various stories that we've heard, and they came under fire for workers who were doing super long shifts, unable to take a break. Boycott Amazon became a Twitter hashtag. Boohoo prides itself on being an inclusive, fun brand, but the brand identity is at odds with what we're seeing in the workplace. In July last year, we had claims that there was exploitation and bad working conditions in their factory in Leicester. And indeed, I will say that this ties back into the wider backlash happening at the moment against fast fashion. Uber, if I can just touch on the behavioural sciences here, they have come under criticism for using nudge theory to promote unsustainable long hours. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, nudge theory refers to using behavioural science techniques to nudge customers or employees to do a desired action, and we can see it ourselves when we're watching for example, Netflix. You can see the countdown 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 comes up. It's a nudge for you to keep watching. Can be used for good, when, for example, you have an appointment coming and you get a text message to remind you of it, or to remind you that you need to renew or book an appointment, for example. But when it's used for bad, that's known as sludge, and Uber came under fire for this due to the algorithm that would, show drivers that they were so close to reaching their target whenever they tried to log off, or would show drivers another job lift required, so they would stay online. And so that really came under a little bit of question as well around how Uber treats its drivers, and indeed this was part of a wider issue as well. And so what we saw was that the brand identity was at ends with the brand company and the culture itself. So really, what this means is that brands need to not only be considering how they have good social practices or environmental practices, or their purpose for their consumers, they need to also be thinking about their purpose and how that links to their employees, to the employee experience. So, I just want to be clear though, because purpose in itself is key, but it's no good if you are trying to do good in a world and you're promoting something that isn't actually lived out in reality. And so this is something I feel very strongly about. There is a real risk that you do something as a brand that could basically become a bit of a marketing campaign. There's a great saying, putting lipstick on a pig. You cannot create something if it's not really lived out in the organisational infrastructure itself. And there's a risk, particularly now, when we see the stats on the new consumer, when we see that there's an opportunity here, that brands will jump on this bandwagon and not actually do much about it. And so what we need to make sure is that it's not something lived out on the surface of a company, but that is actually lived out in the operations of the company itself. So 3 principles to bear in mind here. What you say and what you do matters. Is your purpose filtered through the end-to-end customer experience? Or is it nothing more than a shiny marketing campaign? You may have also heard of the term greenwashing, and greenwashing is really referring to when you're saying that you're a great environmental company, but actually you're not. So an example would be having unnecessary packaging or shipping across the world when you could be using local suppliers, for example. Another term you may have heard is woke washing. This is where companies are jumping on a political or social movement but not doing much about it in practice. So, for example, a company that says it cares about or supports the Black Lives Matter movement, but then is not doing anything internally to promote racial diversity and racial equality, then that may be seen as problematic. So, all in all, having a purpose statement is one thing. Truly believing in it and activating it is quite another. And I think that's something that brands need to challenge themselves with, because it's very tempting to create something, we can all do it and shout about, something that we care about, or this is what we stand for. But if you go beneath the surface, is that actually lived out? That's really, really key. But how can that be done? Well, what you stand for should be integrated across the different stages of the brand experience, as well as the operations itself. And this is a model known as the clock model that is used by Professor Scott Galloway. And what it talks about here is you've got your pre-purchase, you've got the purchase, and you've got the post-purchase aspects, and that all feeds into the brand experience. So your company's purpose needs to not just be a marketing campaign, but needs to be lived out in the customer experience. itself. So if we take the Wild deodorant example I used earlier, if we think about pre-purchase, you know, is there a way to donate £1 to a sustainability company or charity? In their stores, I don't believe they're in stores yet, but when they do their stores have less lighting and electricity than usual? Is their packaging zero waste? Once they, consumers have made the purchase, how can they keep up with Wild? Can the brand send them tangible examples of what they're doing to live out their purpose to their customers after they have actually purchased the product? And actually, I would say that all brands should be considering that post-purchase aspect, because it's really powerful in generating brand loyalty as well. So as a brand manager, be asking yourself, right, we've got this purpose now. How is this purpose lived out through the pre-purchase experience, the purchase experience, and then the post-purchase experience of the customer? Okay, I hope that has been useful. Now, I just want to recap on some of the topics and themes that I've covered so far in this first part of the lecture. Firstly, purpose has been around a while, but it has been criticised in the past, and it's been seen as a little bit of a trend that is difficult to prove. However, COVID-19 has created what we can see as a new customer, a much more reflective, conscious customer, and that has meant that we are seeing more demand for brands to be doing more for society, to be standing for something more than just profit. Both the ESG agenda and how brands treat their employees has become very important and present opportunities for brands to tap into a greater purpose. And finally, purpose needs to be lived out beyond a campaign, beyond a strapline, into the actual customer experience and indeed into the operations as well of a company. Okay, so I'm going to have some water before we pivot to the self and purpose in terms of the self and careers and identity. Okay, right, so I know that on the call today we have a whole range of people of all ages. Some may have been working before, some may be studying, you've come straight from undergrad and now you're thinking what on earth to do with your career. And I know when I was speaking to Pauline, she mentioned that she'd really like me to talk about my own career and how I've created my own identity in some ways. I'm very much happy to share this with you, because I do think COVID-19 has presented more of an opportunity to be able to do this too. So a personal brand, well, what is it? What is it? A personal brand is a widely recognised perception or impression of an individual based on their experience, expertise, competencies, actions and or achievements within a community, industry or the marketplace at large. So that's the definition of it, but really the key bit which I've highlighted or underlined here is widely recognised perception or impression of an individual. The second key statement I want to make is that your personal purpose, your drive, what you stand for, is individual to you. And comparison is the thief of joy. And I think fundamentally it has to be individual to you and it has to be authentic to you rather than something that you try and formulate based on someone else. You can have role models, and I will come on to this later, but really this is a key statement to know that your personal purpose is individual to you. And it all comes down to knowing yourself, to knowing who you are and what you find important, not what your family, friends, colleagues, etc. think you should be doing. And really I'd say that you have the license and the permission to be yourself and translate that into your career, into your hobbies, into the various things that you find stimulating as an individual. Now, the Japanese Ikigai model may help you shape your purpose. Now, the first time I saw this, I was a little bit overwhelmed, I'll be honest. It's pretty intimidating because essentially it's saying that the ideal sweet spot is to find something that you love, something that you're good at, something you can be paid for, and something the world needs. Pretty ambitious in what it's trying to do. But what I would say is don't worry if you feel that you're struggling to find a role that would give you all four. What I would say is focus on the things on this framework that are most important to you as an individual, because no career will be absolutely perfect. For me, I realised that something I love is really important to me. So that top yellow circle, doing something I love, is important to me. And so I'd be asking you, what is it that matters the most to you in this model? Because that will help guide you with where you want to go with your career. And as mentioned, don't worry about feeling you have to get something which is all four straight away. That's probably quite unlikely to happen, but what you can do is think about what's most important to you. Is it what you can be paid for? Are you someone who, when money is really important to you, and that's the driving factor, so it comes back to this point I made around really knowing yourself and knowing who you are and how you can therefore fulfill that through a career. Now, to go back to COVID and the pandemic, our lives have been turned upside down. I'm sure you all feel it. Now, if this was the real world, I would be there with you guys in a lecture studio or a seminar room running this, not virtually, without even seeing your faces. It's very different. But what I would say is that we can also use this time to seek opportunity and adversity. To seek opportunity in adversity. And by probably July this year, hopefully things will be back to normal. But right now, there still is social distancing, lockdown. And so I'd say use this time while you have it. While you have the time that you'd normally be spending socialising or doing other things, think about the opportunity that this creates to give you that freedom to think about your career, to take the time to know yourself, number one, to then grow yourself, number two, and eventually be able to grow others, number three, in the future. And I love this idea of knowing yourself, growing yourself, and then growing others. Now, knowing yourself doesn't always come easily, but what we can do is we can use COVID to help us understand who we are. So reflect, reconsider your career, your overall purpose in life. Ask yourself what it is that excites you, that makes you feel fulfilled, as well as bringing you status and money. For me, when I'm doing my customer innovation work, it's so relatable that it does excite me. It does make me interested, and I work as a consultant on such a range of different areas too. So think about what it is that will make you feel fulfilled and tap into your own values. What's important to you? What is it in terms of your skill set or in terms of subject matter that really makes you thrive and feel energized? Because that's a clue. That's a great place to start. Now, I'm just going to touch a little bit around how I've created a little bit of a portfolio career, you could argue. So my main role, as mentioned, is my job at KPMG, and I've had such an amazing experience there so far. I have worked on a range of clients that you can see here. I have been part of panels. I've also been able to work on CSR and culture initiatives. I've published thought leadership for the firm, and you can see there one on building purpose, building trust, very much linked to what I was talking about earlier. Please do go and read it if you're interested in more. and also Brands and the Brain, which was around behavioural science in building strong brands. And again, please do go read that. I think my highlight, one of the highlights I've had so far at the firm as well, was presenting to 800 people on the gender data gap as part of a behavioural science event, which was so awesome and so exciting. And so what I would say that my job at KPMG has given me is variety and opportunity. I have been able to do things beyond just the 9 to 5. I've been able to publish articles, speak at events, host things, as well as work on amazing, interesting client experiences and projects. So I think that's key. And so what I would urge everyone on the call today is to think to yourself, when you are applying to companies, what is it beyond just the role that will enrich you as an individual? What is it that will allow you to grow as an individual, that will give you opportunities you may not find elsewhere? Because that's really key and something that you should be thinking about. Now, outside of KPMG, I'm also a writer. I studied English at Oxford and absolutely loved it. Writing has always been a part of me. It's quite a lonely occupation, and I don't think it's something I would want to do full-time, which is why I'm not a writer full-time, but I really enjoy being able to do it. It's my way of unwinding. And essentially, over the years, I was writing, and I just thought, you know what, I'm going to create a platform to have all my articles in one place. So I have various articles, I have fashion blogs on there, reflective pieces on there, I have poetry on there, which you can see on the left-hand side, and most recently I've also started bringing in some of my career and work into this platform as well. So it's really become my own mini portfolio, a place where I can hopefully inform, entertain, inspire others, really. And it's my happy place, and I really enjoy doing it. And I never set out to do this, but I've realised it's gained more and more traction, and it's a brilliant way for me to express myself and communicate. And so I'd be asking you to think about how you might express yourself and communicate, and what you can be doing that may fulfil you in that way. I also have my own startup, Help Me Present, which is a public speaking and presenting company. And this really came about, again, through a way that was not planned. I realised through KPMG and my job how much I enjoy presenting, how much I enjoy communicating. And as a result, I also saw that not everyone else felt the same way, that actually there were a number of people who felt very nervous about it, who really hated it. And I saw people who were extremely capable not fulfill their potential because they disliked doing it. And so I had a look out there, and I saw that a lot of the public speaking presenting help was in the form of pretty expensive workshops or day courses that require travel, and I just felt there has to be something simpler here. There has to be something that is more accessible, flexible, affordable for people to use. And so I launched Help Me Present, which is really the tutoring of presenting, and it's been amazing. It's really, helped me because I just enjoy it and I want to help others, and it's been a fantastic journey to be able to create this myself and to run it in my spare time. And what I've noticed is that it's also enriched my career at KPMG in terms of presenting. I've been able to help colleagues with their presenting when we're doing pitches to clients as well. So it's really come full circle in many ways. So what are the benefits of a portfolio career approach? And I never really thought of myself as having a portfolio career until someone actually mentioned it to me, and I thought, oh yes, I suppose you could say that my writing is a little bit of a career in itself, and equally Help Me Present is of course one too. So what are the benefits of this approach? Well, firstly, before I get onto this, I just want to make a bit of a disclaimer about time. Because you're probably sat there wondering, how on earth does this woman have time to be able to do all of this? Firstly, I'd say that Help Me Present and my writing is an enjoyable way that I spend my spare time. My writing literally is a way to unwind. I'm writing poetry. It's like watching a film for me. It's not work. Equally, Help Me Present very much enriches the rest of my life. It's something I enjoy and gain energy from, helping others communicate better. So it doesn't feel purely like work, so I enjoy using my spare time to do it. But what I would say is you have to know when to stop. You have to know when to flux your day. So for example, if I have a client piece at work at KPMG that's really intense for a few weeks, then I will dial down on the other things. So you flex your day. You have to be agile in terms of how you spend your time so that you don't burn out. And I work out, I read, I make sure that I have time to do all the pleasurable things in life as well. And you have to be kind to yourself, but I am a strong believer that you can make these things work. And don't feel, if you're on the call today, thinking, oh, I'd really like to start my own knitting business, but hey, I also want to become an investment banker. Don't feel that you can't do both. Because investment banking, the hours are pretty full on, so maybe that's not the best example. But what I'm trying to say is you can very much experiment. And you can have your own side hustles. I think it's really powerful. And so the benefits of this approach are, number one, it allows you to stay fulfilled and follow a passion rather than just depending on only one avenue. You can take a level of risk while still maintaining security. It does set you apart from others. It makes you stand out. We talk about purpose, personal brand. This is a way that you can create that, because not everyone will be doing this multiple-pronged approach. Not everyone will have hobbies and side hustles that will complement and add to their portfolio. And each area will feed into each other and make you a more creative thinker. And I've seen that so much. My writing and the creativity that I get from that, I bring that into my work as a consultant. And equally, the presenting as well very much complements each other. So you can create a portfolio career which is totally different. That is fine. I know somebody's got his own fitness business as well as being a consultant. But you can also think about various ways that they can complement each other, boost each other. And I think that's really, really powerful as well. If you do want to read any more on this, then there are some great Harvard Business Review articles. The first one, why you should have at least 2 careers. It talks in here about being able to subsidize your skill development and add another string to your bow. It talks about how you can end up making friends in new circles. It talks about how you could have a passion for other things that you then bring back into your day job. And I'll just read you a quote by the author of that particular article. When you follow your curiosities, you will bring passion to your new careers, which will leave you more fulfilled. And by doing more than one thing, you may end up doing all of them better. The next article, Reinventing Your Career in the Time of Coronavirus, this talks about the ability to develop many possible selves and to tap into the purpose that we may feel we want to create because the world has turned upside down. It has made us stop and think and reflect. And again, I'm going to read a quote which I really liked from this. When you don't know what the future will bring, or when the path you thought you were on takes an unexpected turn, it makes sense to pursue a diverse portfolio of options rather than just sticking single-mindedly to one. Even in happier times, i.e. non-COVID, career change and careers is never a perfectly linear process. It's a necessary, messy journey of exploration I love that. Messy journey of exploration. And to do it right, you have to experiment with, test, and learn about a range of possible selves. I think that's a great quote, because certainly I've found that being multifaceted is really powerful, and it will just make you stand out, and ultimately, it will help you perform better in all aspects as well. It's that enrichment to yourself that you're bringing and that you can bring back into your career. So, know thyself. I spoke at the start about COVID giving us this reflective period, this time to tap into our greater purpose, to our meaning in life. And so I just wanted to share with you all, as you're thinking about your careers and what to do, some things that I wish I knew before. Everyone and anyone successful has had many failures and knockbacks. Dreaming big is key, and seeking inspiration from all avenues. Trusting the process. Being aware that it takes time. Knowing that in order to grow, you've got to be proactive with your personal development. The fact is, you've got to find coaches, mentors, sponsors to help you. I'm very grateful for those who've been in my life and helped me. Being agile and open to new experiences is key. So these are some of the things I wish I knew before, and I will share these slides around after, by the way. But when I was reflecting on this, it was really interesting putting this together, because I found that all of these are so key. I mean, the first one, we think about people who are successful and we think that they never had a no in their life or they never failed. And actually, we're seeing more and more people come out who are successful say that they had times in their life where they failed. And, that is a natural part of it. I've had times in my life when I've changed career or thought about going into an area that actually didn't suit me, but it's helped me pivot back. Seeking inspiration, I think, is so powerful. It can be YouTube videos, it can be books, it can be people, whatever it might be, but seeking inspiration from all avenues helps as well. And so all of these things, I think, are really, really key, and I'd ask you to really think about this and ultimately know that you have the license and the permission to create your own personal purpose and your own personal brand. Now, as we come to the end of the lecture, I've spoken about brand, purpose, organisational wise, and I've also spoken a little bit about the self, because I know Pauline mentioned some of you are thinking about your careers now as well. And I was thinking how I could potentially tie this lecture together. And I thought that this framework, known as the 3 hurdles, was a brilliant way to do it. And it's excellent to apply both to organisational, brand managers when they're thinking about their organisational purpose can think of this, but also think of it in terms of yourself and your own identity. So if I go through it, relevance. Does what you do resonate with individuals? Is it relevant? If I take an organisational perspective, if we look at Ford versus Ferrari, Ford, very relevant in terms of the brand is the everyman brand. It's very versatile. It connects with the masses. And so I'd ask you, what is your relevance in the world? What are you doing? What is it that you may bring to the world that's in line with trends? What's the relevance in what you do in your career? The second one around differentiation. If I take the car example again and we look at Ferrari, they are very specialised. They stand for Italian luxury, scarcity. What they do is something very special in many ways. They're rare, and it makes them special. For every one Ferrari dealership, there are 100 Ford dealerships. So they've created this scarcity bias in many ways, where people want them because they are so rare. They are different to the other mass cars in the market. And again, when we bring this around to yourself and your identity, what is it that makes you different? What is it that makes you special and stand out? What is it that people will think about you and think about why you're different when you leave the room? And then sustainability. And when I say sustainability in this context, I mean, are you able as an organisation or the self to own what you do? How can you stop others copying you? How can you sustain your brand as a company in the market? But how can you sustain yourself in the market, your own purpose? Is that longitudinal? Is it something more than just temporary? And actually, when we think about the self, we can go one step further and think about sustainability in terms of physically sustaining ourselves, mentally sustaining ourselves. You know, that is so key as well. So really, when we're thinking about brand purpose and personal purpose, I think this is a brilliant framework to consider when we're trying to define that. What's the relevance in it? How is it different? And how are you going to sustain it? Both the company purpose and both your personal purpose and your personal brand identity. So hopefully that's been a useful way to wrap this up. I have totally enjoyed running this lecture for you all. I'm now super excited to answer any questions you may have and go from there really. So again, thank you so much. I hope this has been valuable and I'll open the floor to questions now.